Live streaming is on.
Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. It is April 23, 2021. We want to thank Clinton Ignatoff for helping us today, and he'll be back. Thank you, Clinton. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Derrick de Kerckhove. Wow, it's been years, Derrick, and I really appreciate your time and energy. The first question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
Well, that's a start. Well, you know what? It's to be alive. Honestly, no, really. I often think that life, I'm almost like a Indian Jain, this sect that actually believes that everything alive is sacred. Well, I do. I think to be or not to be is still the question.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. The next question is what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Inspiration. Inspiration is it's the most wonderful way when you suddenly start going on fire. There's nothing like it. It comes from, you can't command it, but when it's there, it's the best thing in the world.
You are brilliant. That is very fiery. And it's like I've been watching some of your TED Talks, and boy, do I get inspired by them because you're so dang articulate. So why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Well, all animals, all mammals anyway, tend to have communities. I'm very interested in Vico, Giambattista Vico. He described language beginning as gestures and grunts, cries. Our species, but not only ours, is endowed with meaning-making possibilities. And it's very interesting because right now we're about to lose that. Or rather, we're about to lose language as the dominant meaning-making system, because a digital culture is coming through and it's taking over, and there is no meaning in digital culture, just commands.
Derrick, do you more pursue meaning or more pursue happiness?
They actually come together for me. When I get meaning, I get happy. And I really like them both. I am, by and large, a happy person. But my greatest happiness comes from discovering stuff that I've been looking for, coming upon something that I hadn't known before. And then it just, I'm happy for the day, for the week, maybe for the month, if it's that great.
Beautiful. Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until how would you fill in that blank?
That's interesting. I don't know what I think until stuff that I'd forgotten comes back. And then but it's true, because then what I'm worried about now is fed by what I was thinking before, and something new shows up. Yeah, that probably is the best way.
That's beautiful. Yeah, because Marshall says, I don't know what I think until I've said it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I wrote it. And it goes on and on. So, Derrick, do thoughts create emotions?
They can. Not always, but they can. But in the West, we have separated emotions from cognition. The word for knowing or for perceiving in the Chinese culture is the heart mind. It's called qin, and you can't separate them in China. Whereas you can't even separate that from ethical issues. All three come together. Whereas we separate everything. We're cognitive one way, we're emotional another way. I think it's wonderful when you can bring them together. But it's such a different way of thinking from what I've just said, from the Chinese.
Yeah, I often say that in my discussion groups. Well, you can't really separate feelings from thoughts, but we did invent the two words. Why did the West separate and the East didn't?
Oh, you don't want me to tell you that.
in 1 minute or less.
You're hitting the spot. My sense, I have very much followed McLuhan in that way. We have all been at the McLuhan program with Marshall studying the effect of the alphabet. And as far as I'm concerned, it is the reason why we analyze everything. The Greek alphabet was very different from the Semitic one that they took from the Phoenician. And what happened was that adding vowels, they made continuous the line of writing and its perfect representation of the line of speaking. Whereas in Hebrew, in Arabic, in Phoenician, in Egyptian, in all these languages, vowels are not necessary because they play the grammatical role. They make the connection between the words, but the words by themselves can be written without without vowels. Well, they used signs for them for teaching kids, but basically, once you have made complete the line of the written representation of sounds, you've created an entirely different strategy from the brain, and you've encouraged analyzing everything. The atom was invented by the Greeks way back when. Now, how could you invent the atom without ever having seen anything close to it? You could only do that by deduction, by analysis, in fact, there was one comparison made by Democritus between the letters of the alphabet and atoms. Democritus said, as we use letters and combine them to make tragedies or comedies, you can imagine matter is made of the combination of different kinds of atoms. That's analytical. And that's why we separate everything. And Descartes, the method of Descartes, same thing. Analyze everything and then put it together.
Really well put. Thank you. Go ahead.
No, it's a Western thing, and we are saddled with it. And so we have to live with it. But we are learning. And we're going to have to learn fast because we're into a very serious epistemological crisis between the digital culture and the literate culture. They don't agree. It seems that they are, but they don't agree.
Derrick, what you said evoked two things for me. Bucky Fuller said, I seem to be a verb. And in American Indians or indigenous culture, I've heard they have no nouns. They only have verbs.
Yes, you're getting into heavy territory again. Why? Because, of course, we're into Sapir-Whorf. You remember Sapir-Whorf? You must have done some Sapir-Whorf yourself. Well, I was a big fan.
Yes.
I was a big fan of Whorf.
Yeah.
And I must have been a linguistic determinist for a while. I've changed my mind since. But there is clearly a very strong relationship between epistemology and words, right? Yeah. And our epistemology, our Western epistemology, has been very much dependent on that relationship. And we have believed either in what's called linguistic determinism or linguistic relativisms, and I'm on the side of linguistic relativisms. Why? Because yes, the fact that you have a word in one language to describe a color, which was Benjamin Whorf's example. If you have a word to describe pink and people only see red, then you teach those that, well, when red is not completely red, it's pink, and then people begin to know it. So that means that the word actually makes them see it. But on the other hand, you're born in an existing language, and that existing language is one which already has all these descriptions. And whatever is new, you have to deal with it by asking questions and so on. So we can't be determinists. We can only be relativists when it comes to that, particularly because of, let's say, Piaget, who says that interaction with the environment is what actually creates and builds the language and the words in the child's mind and the child's life. So we can't be determinists. We can only be relativists, and we have to deal with all of this as not a single cause, but several causes coming together. Causae ad causas is invicem sunt. McLuhan used to have. He had it written, in fact, in the McLuhan the Center for Culture and Technology. So a big line of with Cicero under it, saying causas in vicem sunt. Causes are causes to each other. This is our situation today. Everything is being entangled.
Wow. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Marshall said the speed of thought. You can get to the moon faster by thinking about it than going there, or even for light. Light takes a bit of time to get there. Now, we don't know how fast thought really is, but I think Marshall was right. Of course, he was right in this god-awful way that he had of always twisting anything that could be called scientific to his own needs. As far as he was concerned, I just want to be understood. I don't want to be right.
Thank God, Derrick, you're laughing, because I think that was a major part of why we're attracted to Marshall, is that, like Gurdjieff says, laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no. And boy, does it serve a good purpose. So Audre Lorde says you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rayner responded, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Oh, well, the book I'm writing now is a tool. It's writing it with a co-author who is a friend of mine from Italy called Stefano Calzati, and it's called the Quantum Ecology. And why do we write this? Is because we believe that the tool to overcome the epistemological crisis that is not only already there, but it's going to grow with all the fake news, with all the sort of, it's a long story, but we are losing our interiority. Our kids are losing their interiority. They're putting it in their cell phones, so that we have less and less resistance, individual resistance to things like fake news. When you ask about emotions, well, in fact, that's all that they've got left. That's all that a lot of voters for the president of the United States have left. It's a very dangerous and serious situation, and in fact, it's the reason we have so many populist leaders and so on. So we have a tremendous problem with our house. So how do we rebuild that house? We rebuild it by understanding the deeper meaning of the quantum physics and the quantum ecology, which is how profoundly intricate all our situations are. We have always in the West looked at the world as a spectacle. We are standing there, we have a point of view, we look at it and we make a decision about it and make judgments about it. But that's not the way it goes. We are part of it. And everything is part of it. And that's hugely important. And once we get that house will crumble.
Very good. So I'm going to say a McLuhan line, tell you how I sort of think it, what I interpret it as, and then you tell me yours. Everybody experiences far more than they understand, yet it is experience rather than understanding that influences behavior. The way I hear that is, if the child comes in from the cold weather, you tell the child, don't touch the stove, it will burn your hand. That's called experience. Instead, the parent should say, let me teach you the dynamics of heat. You can get really close to the stove, warm your hands up, and not burn your hand. Understand the dynamics. So Marshall's promoting understanding over experience. How do you interpret that McLuhan line?
Well, first of all, the most interesting part of it is that we experience much, much more than we understand. And it's so true that he used to talk about the double take. When you look at somebody and you have to look at that person again to recognize that that's the person you already knew. That's experience without understanding that becomes understanding. Understanding comes in the interval between the first and the second take. And so we have to have a second take about everything. Otherwise, it doesn't register. We do experience a lot. We experience all the time. It's a disaster how little we understand from what we experience every minute of our lives.
Yeah.
And we're lucky to be able to understand some of it.
Well, with guiders like you, boy, am I lucky. So, are you more afraid of old ideas or more afraid of new ideas?
Well, I'm not afraid of any idea. I just make sure that they're interesting and valuable to follow. I would say that I don't require the new idea to correspond to the old one, but I don't want the new idea to make me think that the old one means nothing. I just don't really like people who only have old ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm, charitable too, but they usually get on my nerves. I can't live without new ideas. I really can't.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've found in our few encounters live together and in person, and this is a live encounter, and your tapes and books, is that you're a gracious person, and I appreciate this. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
What do I worry about when I go? I always worry about something I'm supposed to write. That's the first thing, right? And the wonderful thing is, if I do worry about it before I go to bed, not every time, let's say maybe 2 or 3 times every 10 days, 10 nights, I would say, I will wake up in the middle of the night. And again, not every time I wake up in the middle of the night, I am going to be inspired, but I sometimes am superbly inspired. And I just love it. And I write everything down. And of course, the next day I don't understand anything I wrote, but it's still interesting. So,
very good.
Yeah.
So McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, according to my research, that the artists are antenna of the race. They broadcast the hidden psychic effects of what we invent so that we can learn to cope with the hidden psychic effects. Marshall probed how we can look to the artists, writers, painters, filmmakers to reveal and uncover these hidden psychic effects, but we still ignore them. Why do humans still ignore the hidden psychic effects, even though they can turn to the artist to reveal them?
Artists perceive things and people conceive them. And that's already a huge difference. The artist invites you to perceive something, as in a gestalt. You have to see the whole thing at once. Whereas people analyze, as I said before, with concepts, which usually are old ideas. And so they don't get it. They just don't get it. It's easier with music. For example, I have tried to connect musical forms with new media. Why did the wah-wah, that pedal that you would add to your electric guitar, created rock music? Well, that was the message of electricity. But when computers came on, suddenly you had the clock of the computer. What was it called? It was techno, of course. It was techno, but there's a history of, from the waltz all the way to house, of changing rhythms that actually do help people to understand things have changed, but mostly kids, not their parents. And it's something that's very strong. But when you deal with painting, for example, it's not always evident Jackson Pollock or whatever is, all these Claude Toussignon in Canada. Sometimes it is explained. The artist has a school, and then somebody tells you what they were doing, and then you suddenly get it. But it's the same thing we were talking about experience. We experience, but we don't understand. And so they let it be. Plus the fact that the artist is considered as somebody who is not quite right, and it has to be not quite right in order to be an artist anyway. He's not normal. He's not like us. He's not a scientist. For the last 30 years, we've been talking about how science and art should get together, do get together. But no, the artist is still the odd man out, or the odd woman out, by the way. We got a problem here.
Yeah. Yeah, odd person out. That is really well put. And so, yeah, that's interesting. You brought up the wah-wah, because the guy who invented the wah-wah, I asked him all these same questions once. So the next one is, Derrick, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Yes. I was 4. I was 4 years old. And I can almost see it. I don't know if I'm rebuilding it. Memory, remembering is putting the members together again. So you can't trust your own memory. But my memory is of being smaller than flowers in a little patch, which was next to the alley that my parents had their car in. And there was a car on the right, and I could see these very tall flowers, and I was walking through them. I was 4. I know that I was 4. Because it's a special time where my parents were and so on. It's a bit of a mandala or a mantra for me, that memory, because it's a very nice one.
It's a beautiful memory. In fact, either Cézanne or Matisse said, if you paint a painting and you put it in the bushes, with the flowers, and it blends in, it's a good painting. like you were a good kid, you blended in right with the flowers, but you noticed you were a little smaller.
I was smaller than the flower, that's for sure.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Oh, it's a blessing. It's a blessing that we're losing, because we're putting so much of it in all the content is moving into our cell phone. It is a really serious problem. No, it's an absolute. For me, it's a blessing. I mean, of course, what does that betray? It betrays that my life has been something worth remembering for me, not for others. I'm not going to write my biography, but it is something that I look back upon with a lot of joy. Yeah, I've had problems. I really have. And I know everybody has. And it's banal to say this, but the point is, why weigh in your present moment with remembering the nasty things when you can remember the nice ones?
Yeah.
It's a philosophy.
It's a no-brainer. So tell me, please, an early role model or someone who had an impact on you within your immediate family, and what was that impact, just briefly, and then outside your immediate family?
Well, within my family, it was probably my grandmother, the mother of my mother. I hardly knew the grandmother on my father's side, but the other one was a lovely, warm, a little bit batty, but she was a great person, and she had a natural propensity to love. And that is something that sticks when you're a kid. And to love, you learn very quickly to know the difference between how people love and how they don't, even though they say they do. But I have been surrounded by people who were quite loving. She was certainly one of them. And there was a woman also where I stayed as a kid, for about 6 months, I think, because my father moved to Pakistan, and he was a United Nations observer. So for a while, I had to be taken care of by friends of them. And that other woman was a wonderful woman. And then my first teacher, a very rough, sort of big and loud. She was really an awful, wonderful person. She was awful because she even, I don't think she beat us. Don't think she ever did that. But and at the same time, she exuded a very strong character and a very strong, genuine love for the students, all of them, not just for me. Madame Verskoren was her name. It was in De Zoet, in the south of Belgium, north of Belgium, by the sea anyway. And she was lovely. I think I've loved some of my teachers. Marshall was one of them, of course.
Yeah.
But you're asking me about the role model when I was a kid. Marshall was a role model when I was an adult.
Yeah.
Still is.
Well, we'll get into that, and you have talked about that a lot. Tell me, did your parents raise you a particular religion?
They were not that concerned about it. I don't think. I was raised Catholic, but my parents, we hardly ever talked about this at home. We didn't talk about religion, and we didn't talk about politics, and we didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about all the things that make people angry. It just didn't come around. No, we did not agree on everything with my parents, and they didn't agree with the other kids. I was the third of 4 boys, quite a household to handle. My mother being the only woman of 5 men around. Imagine how easy it would have been for her. But no, it was not something my parents were very keen on.
Derrick, if God exists, what do you want God to tell you after you die?
That's a very good question. I had never thought that God would want to tell me anything. I would probably want him to. Yeah, I would want him to tell me why did I spend that wonderful time on Earth?
That is a great answer. And do you pray?
Yes, I do. I do. Yeah. I think everybody does in one way or the other, and I do. My wife died about almost 20 years ago, and I think it got me feeling very strongly her presence during those almost 20 years. She died in 2003, so we're now 18 years. But I have felt her presence all that time. And that's a form of prayer.
Yes. Beautiful. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Oh, that's a tricky one. That's a very tricky one. There are some pretty nasty people around. There's no doubt about that. But it's very hard to judge. For me, excuse me, I don't know what your political side is, but for me, the example of evil for me was unfortunately the last president of the United States. And not the one president. I really did not like that man. I think he destroyed everything. And I don't know whether evil was using him. And I know that a lot of theory goes about the fact that producing him was something that came from a long time. There was all kinds of things. But having destroyed the possible relationship with China, for one thing, was disastrous. Biden is continuing. I don't think Biden is evil. I'm not saying that. But for me, there was a lot of evil going on. And I think what's happened to this beautiful country, the United States, is now having to lick its wounds. and to destroy 330 million people. How many people can do that? And when they can do that, why do they do it? Sorry, I know I'm getting political, and I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I am a Canadian, and I live in Italy. But I am, if you ask me, I know a lot of evil things happening, but when you can concentrate it in what your question was, do you think people are used? Evil uses people? That's a very good question. Does this man believe anything at all that he did? Yeah. Or was he just a perfect tool which was put there by an absolute conspiracy? I'm not talking QAnon here. I'm talking about the people like Steve Bannon and company who were engineering, this man that they thought was a complete fool anyway, but he was the right kind of fool. So yes, he was used. Well,
that's funny.
What?
Yeah.
I'm saying you can't.
No, that's good. That's fun. I understand. I understand what you said, and it's funny you brought up Bannon because Bannon drops McLuhan's name. If you didn't know, there's several times he drops McLuhan's name. So, this. Did you know that? Anyways, so to carry on this theme, you don't be sorry because what you're saying is what we're about here. We're talking ideas and you're telling me your feelings, and I appreciate that. Derrick, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? I set this one up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you address the Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Yes, I think he's right. Up to a point, he's right. But at the same time, it's sometimes impossible not to acknowledge them, so that you get trapped into a situation where, yes, if you can extirpate yourself from that situation, that's probably a good strategy. But I have what comes to mind in your question is a Napolitan, Naples motto of my enemies, I can handle that, but of my friends, God helps me. I know. Dai miei nemici ci penso io, dai amici Dio mi aiuta. I know, but no, that obviously was a silly joke. But getting out of the way is probably the best strategy. You see, acknowledging your enemy in the Alan Watts way, giving him power, is putting you in that duo, that couple that you make with the enemy. But you also know that if you show fear to the dog will attack you. If you don't show fear, then the dog will just sit there. And this is verified every time it happens. Now, I don't know if a tiger would be quite so gentle, but, the dog anyway, hey, depends on the dog. Could be a Doberman, it could be, a boxer, whatever. But yeah, there is a strategy. If you show strength without menacing or without aggression, but just show strength. I mean, after all, we're back into the nuclear parity. That's what it is, what it was, getting to make sure that, okay, you're making bombs, we can do that too. So just relax. That's showing strength. It's not attacking. You don't want to use the bomb. Now, today, with all the idiots that we have running countries, we don't know what's going to happen. But that's the kind of thing that you deal. Also, creating the pair of friend-enemy, creating Watts is right in that sense that we are we are using language. Talk about the epistemology of words. We're using language that position people in confrontation when in fact they might not have to be. And maybe the wisdom is to deal with. That's why diplomacy exists. I mean, it's how to deal with that. Right now, diplomacy is all over the place.
Yeah, Baba Ram Das said back years ago, he says, "I'm having a real hard time loving George Bush." And then and then my friend recently, before Ram Dass died a couple of years ago, he was visiting him, and on his altar there was a picture of Trump. He wasn't worshiping Trump. He was saying the only way I can deal with this guy is try to love him. Is hating him really going to do anything? So this is a little shift. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago, the Volta Cinema. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" And years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Sometime, my father was a good caricaturist. He made very good cartoons. He was extraordinary at taking the right features of anybody, and he would do it all the time. It was a lot of fun to be with him, and he would be at a restaurant, and of course, something very rude to do, but he would just describe this person. And I realized that that's why we do things. We reduce features to a set of recognizable patterns that we can associate with a situation or a place or a person. The other example of that is if you want to learn a language, or if you want to understand somebody speaking a foreign language that you don't know very well, you're better off listening to somebody who doesn't know it very well either than somebody who speaks it very well. I've experienced that many, many times. So when you can elicit the features of a situation, and artists do that all the time, by highlighting the aspects that really are meaningful, that actually make the situation understandable. That's why I think people want art, photography, theater, painting, and all these things. When particularly when it's figurative. When it's not figurative, it becomes a little bit more difficult to decode.
Yeah, very good. See, I heard that McLuhan turned John Cage onto Finnegan's Wake, and eventually Cage developed what's called writing through. That is, you reduce something and you satirize it. So we grew up with Mad Magazine. Why go see the movie Rocky when you can watch it, look at it in a comic book for 5 minutes and laugh at it, So the question is really simple. Can satire be destructive?
Can satire be destructive? Yeah, you can destroy somebody's reputation with satire, but it's not meant to be destructive. It's meant precisely to make people recognize some of the features that I was talking about.
Yeah.
Satire is actually constructive. We need an education, and you know what? In the history of the French literature, among the most interesting were people like La Bruyère or La Rochefoucauld, who were making extremely funny description of characters. And those characters then they stepped on the stage, so to speak. They became how they were described. And it's also true that all of literature has been educating us to live experiences. Today we ask cinema to do it, but in the past it was you would read and would slip into the skin of these characters, and suddenly you became these characters, and for a while that built your character. So all of that comes in. Satire has had one of real role in doing that. in finding the features of the personalities of the time. What would be very useful right now is to find the great satirists who could actually describe our time in a way that makes us make our peace with it, because it's a hard time to live in.
Yeah. Very good. Blake said, we become what we behold.
Yes.
And so tell us your through line. You're growing up and then you start gravitating towards literature, psychology, and then how did you get to the point where you went, oh, I can write books and I can teach? Like, just briefly, the through line, like what first attracted you to saying, oh, I can do that?
I got into the university not really by accident, but because it was easy. I came from Europe at the age of 17. I was put in, the last year of an honors BA, which was amazing for a 17-year-old. And I had quite an easy time at it. And that I became a teacher of French. I spoke French. That was my trade, so to speak. So I had no problem finding a job. It was a time when people were just hungry for people teaching. And I wasn't considering, I've never been an academic, by the way. I want to make a confession right away. I am not an academic. And I find it very difficult to be one when I'm asked to be one, because I think footnotes are a real bore. I don't have, and Marshall didn't encourage me to be an academic at all. He encouraged me to have ideas. But what happened was this, that around Marshall, I had to write a thesis to keep my job when I was at the University of Toronto. And I was really unhappy about it. And Marshall pulled me out of my misery by saying, what your problem is you don't understand that tragedy, I was writing about French tragedy in the 17th century. He said, you don't understand, tragedy is not an art form. And I said, what? And he said, no, it's not an art form. It's the technology of communication to help the Greeks to discover their identity. I call it quid, he said, quest for identity. Well, I certainly wasn't writing a book. It took me, years to just get to write the first few pages. But after talking to McLuhan, I wrote my thesis, 400 pages of it in less than 4 months. He had just hit the right spot. He had told me what the problem was. The problem was theater is not just to make people feel happy. It's to make them, or happy or unhappy or whatever emotion, it is to make them understand something profoundly different about themselves. I got that. But by the time I got my thesis, I knew what I really wanted to write about. And that's when I discovered that I wanted to write. I wanted to write about why the alphabet had done this to the Greeks. I'm back to the alphabet, but I mean, this is my obsession. It's not only mine, it was the obsession of everybody. Yeah. Hadlock, Innes, McLuhan, Logan, everybody was about the alphabet. So I was just one of them. But the point is, it helped me a great deal, and that's what motivated me. I wanted to write. So I went to neurology. I'm not a neurologist, just as I'm not a quantum physicist. Going into areas which are not my own is where I'm going to discover the new things, right? And I'm looking for new things, and I'm looking for new things that make sense. I don't want to just have any new thing. I want to make sense. And so that's why being a writer is try to make sense by writing for oneself and for other people. You always have to think about who's going to read you, So that's how it happened. And it's very hard for me to write. I can tell you it's one of the most difficult. It's always difficult. It wears me out. After every day now for the last month and a half or so, I have been writing and stopping writing in a state of exhaustion because it is so difficult to write the right thing. It's just very, very difficult. But I do it anyway.
Beautiful. It's really an inspiration for me to hear you tell me that, Derrick, because sort of like when I try to write, I go, oh yeah, I'm into it. And then I'm like, you got to nudge yourself. And then when you anyways, you must have ESP as well, because you anticipated the next two questions. So I'm going to ask them anyways. If you want to fill in a little, you can, but you sort of asked them. You sort of answered them, excuse me. A screenwriting teacher told me that a great film or great art, great book is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great film, great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. And then I would ask, what role does intention play in your creative process? Now, you sort of covered it. I'm going to ask the second question, and if you want to just go, already covered them, fine. Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much do you think of your audience while you're writing? So it's intention and
Yeah, I have a lot of respect and fondness for my audience. That imaginary nobody out there. I do. I have a lot of respect. I am definitely more of a rhetorician than a logician. You know, at the McLuhan used to talk about the tree. You're either a grammarian, and that means you dig in and you discover things that are, somewhere that nobody knew, or you are a logician. So, and he hated those. You just are putting your concepts together and you come up with some decent syllogism, or you are a rhetorician. And if you're a rhetorician, you put the audience before your text. You write to make those people understand. As a teacher, all teachers have to be rhetoricians. They have to make themselves understood. I like what Kubrick is saying, but I'm closer as a teacher and as a person to the first man you mentioned. I'm always very aware of something that Boileau, a French satirist, wrote. He said, ce qui se conçoit bien s'énonce clairement, et les mots pour le dire arrivent aisément. What is well conceived, ce qui se conçoit bien, s'énonce clairement, is written with clarity, and the words to say it come naturally. And I really feel that, and this is where I am a bit schizo, because I'm on the one hand very influenced by McLuhan, but I was brought up in a Cartesian mold, and I've never been able to shake it. So I need to have a clear idea. And in fact, that is one of the problems of writing. When my idea, and writing is a clarification of ideas. When I get to it, and I suddenly say, okay, je le conçois bien, I really conceive it well, then writing is, fluid. But unfortunately, it lasts till the time when my pen drops because I can't hold it anymore. So, and the next day, of course, I'm just as stupid as I used to be.
Well, Frank Zappa says stupidity is the building block of the universe, so don't feel bad. It's like not knowing is what we're all. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I have company in that.
Well, we're all trying to get to that not knowing stage. Yeah, we're trying to get to that not knowing stage. We're all know-it-alls, whodunits.
About that, I'm just going to say one more thing about that. I don't know whether you liked or not.
Yeah,
Carlos Castaneda. I loved him. I thought he was wonderful. That was somebody who was giving us a lot of ideas.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the most interesting ideas that I'm only realizing right now, and largely because of quantum physics, when he says, his brujo, his sorcerers with whom he has the Yaqui way of knowledge, he says, the brujo tells him, you are going to see things, you are going to know things, everything will become clear to you. But that's not the last phase. You have to get over clarity. That's very profound. That's very profound, because clarity is what Newton has given us. Quantum physics is not giving us that security. Quantum physics is giving us only incertitude, like Heisenberg said. So it's very important to get over clarity. Now, does that mean me being stupid again? I don't know. I'm not really quite over clarity yet.
That's beautiful. I really can talk about clarity, but let's move on for a second. This is Michael Apted, the great film director, just passed away. 35 years ago, I asked him why rock video makers feel so obliged to edit fast. He told me because we've learned to take in information faster. Marty Scorsese said then, when MTV first came out, I edit my films faster because of MTV. So the question's asked with a bias. Can we humans indeed learn to take in information faster?
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I loved Blade Runner. I didn't like very much the new version, but I went back to see the previous one to see, what was wrong with the new one. And I thought it was so slow. And that's it. We are educated to speed. We're educated to editing. We're all editors. We edit all the time. And editing is something that we have to do very fast in order to understand. We don't pile things up anymore. We don't combine them. We don't remember. We edit. Yeah. So it has to be fast. It's a fast clip, and we're living at a faster clip. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Is it literally possible to multitask?
Is it possible to multicast? Yeah, well, when you're driving a car.
Not
multitask.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, when you're driving a car, you're multitasking. And you better do it right. You're multitasking. We multitask all the time. We really do. It's hard to avoid. I think in meditation, perhaps you can, not multitask, but I don't think we can, not in the context of lives we live right now, not with our speed, not with our computers, not with our telephones. I mean, I can remember the time when talking on your cell phone while you were at your dinner with somebody was considered like the most rude thing one could possibly do. Now everybody does it. People use cell phone to talk to each other across the table. So everything has changed. We have been accelerated. We're not exploding. So be it.
Yeah. Derrick, what do you think the motive of the cave artist was? Now what Herzog or anthropologist says, your hunch, what's your deep feeling? What was the motive of the cave artist?
Wow. Well, of course, the first thing that comes to mind is a magic trick. You paint a bull or something, and that's because that's what you want to catch to feed the family. But there's also a great variety of art. There is also the joy of making something that is satisfying to the person who makes it. I'm not thinking about so much of the Cro-Magnon and grottos and all the things in France. I'm more interested in things that they found in recently, not so old, 12,000 years old, made with red ochre on very large walls of stone. There may be a language there, we don't know yet, because of the difference in the repetition of certain signs. But I think that the joy of inscribing, the joy of being able to do that, and then, it's the joy of the writer.
Yeah. Joy is a great word. Derrick, what's more important, conviction or compromise?
Oh, compromise. Anytime. The expert is the one who stays put, said McLuhan. Compromise, you learn something. And you actually, again, quantum physics tells us to compromise all the time. By intrication, by superposition. by entanglement, compromise. Everything is compromise. If you are part of the environment, you are compromised. If you just stand out of it and you are looking at it as Brecht asked his audience to watch the play, well, then you're a Western victim. You're absent-minded as ABC. Who was it who said Joyce or it's very Joycean, but I don't think it was him. It was
no, it was Joyce. It was Joyce. ABC minded, ABCD minded, absent-minded.
Yeah, I know, but I think Ezra Pound said it too, and that's why I was doubting.
Oh, yeah, very good. Well, you know, there's no right or wrong answers to any of my questions, but that one you got right. Thank you. T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
I'm very interested in that question because, of course, my inner dialogue has three languages. Living in Italy, a lot of it is Italian, but a lot of it is English because it's faster and easier. Some of it is French. And then the most interesting thing about that is not so much the inner dialogue, but dreams. Yeah. If, for example, I leave Italy, in Italy, I mostly dream in Italian. But if I leave Italy and I go to Canada, for 2 days, I will continue dreaming in Italian. Then I dream in English. And I come back to Italy, and for 2 days, I'm going to be dreaming in English. So I don't know whether dream qualifies as internal dialogue, although it is in some fashion. I'm fascinated by dreams. I think they are one of the most extraordinary mysteries of which we are completely in the blue. Nobody, not even the best neuroscientists really know anything about it. It's really sad. And yet it's happening all the time. And what's really interesting, which has made all the wisdom in the history of various culture meditate, the fact that when we dream, we are so much in it that it's exactly the same way as when we are, like now, I'm talking to you. So people have said, life is but a dream. You know, a lot of that has been said. I think it's so fascinating. And I'm now studying every angle of the kinds of things happen when I'm dreaming. For the moment, I mean, I don't want to waste time on this, but no, my internal dialogue is multilingual. It is definitely present. It's definitely present, and I'm not entirely happy about that. I would like it to be translinguistic, and it's not that easy to be translinguistic, and that's because I read and write. But if you could go beyond, Lao Tzu, to talk about the Chinese again, said, you know, don't let language put you in prison, just like Nietzsche. Nietzsche said, you know, the prison house of language. I am in a prison house of language, and I'd like to get out of it sometime.
Wow, put you in the prison house of language. Well, again, you really helped me understand my questions deeper, because often, Derrick, when I ask what language is your inner dialogue in, and one of my favorite answers was Abigail Child, a great experimental filmmaker. She goes, "I wish I knew." Which was just an amazing answer. But sometimes they go English, and I go, okay, then I follow it up and I say, well, what form is your inner consciousness in? See, I'm really more going for not literally what language your inner dialogue is, but like what's, you know, the form of your inner consciousness. So then you took it both ways. You said literally French, you know, Italian, English, and then you said the dreams. So McLuhan probed Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, saying artists, and not to be elitist, but artists use it. Everybody has this creative power they use while they're sleeping, but artists also use that creative power while they're awake. They dream awake. And so Cocteau said it interesting. It's a filmmaker's privilege to be able to allow a large number of people to dream the same dreaming together, and to show us, moreover, the optical illusions of unreality with a rigor of realism.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
I'm a super fan of Cocteau. I mean, I really am.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. Yeah. One of his most important books is L'étonnement d'être, the astonishment of being. Another mantra. Another mantra. And so Cocteau, yes, Cocteau has been an extraordinary artist. He was quite legible. He too was very Cartesian in a sense that whatever he did, there was a lot of mystery, but his mystery came from things we already knew. He put together all kinds of stuff that every little Frenchman or French woman would have been brought up on, and then turned them on their head. The infernal machine, what an extraordinary way of dealing with Oedipus. He's one of the gifts to the French world and the rest of the world too.
Yeah. And so I've studied experimental film a lot, and George Manupelli, one of its icons, his mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there's no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more vehicles for whatever dominant technology or culture is present? I know it's both and it depends.
No. I find self-expression a waste of time. I really do. I think that to be like a photographic plate, the receptor of the right vibes, and I call them vibes because I don't have the right word for the moment, but the right pressures, the right concatenation, arrival of the various things that you forget, you see, you don't want to see, the feelings, all of that has to come in certain ways that actually makes that kind of sense. That's what the expression you want an artist to do. Speaking about himself, who cares?
Yeah.
I
really
mean,
well put.
Navel gazing is absolutely the last thing I would like to do.
Yeah, can art making be egoless?
Sorry?
Can art making be egoless?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. I think it's absolutely, it is possible. It's, in fact, the more you remove it, the better art you probably get. But that's because you have to, it's the antenna of the race. It's not the dick.
That is well put. Lewis Carroll said, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
No, I have to be honest. I don't look for impossible things. Maybe that's something wrong. I should probably start to look in that direction. I mean, thank you for the tip anyway.
Well, thank Lewis. Derrick, this is fun. Thank you. Is perception reality?
According to neuroscientists, and I have been in reasonably frequent contact with one of the best, we have what that scientist called Jean-Pierre Changeux, we have mental objects. Mental objects are of 3 categories, according to him, and he and his team have actually identified where these happen, because today you can use magnetic resonance imaging, so it becomes very easy to know what part of the brain are being stimulated by what kind of stimulus. And what he says was that perceptions are stimulated by direct evidence of whatever it is that you are looking at. And they occupy a specific area of the brain. I can't remember which right now. The second category is what he calls image of memory, or what I would call in English icons. An icon is something that happens to your brain when, after looking at something for which you have perceptual input, And remember too that perceptual input doesn't give you a isomorphic repetition in your brain of what it is you're seeing. There's a lot of acculturation even in our perceptions. But let's put that aside. Your icon loses a great deal of what sensorial input that you were having with the percept. And then the third category is a concept. And the concept is a very dried up stick figure of whatever it is that you were actually exposed to. If you were talking about the same thing, so I'm looking at a face, I close my eyes, I see a caricatural remembrance of that face, but it's not the face anymore. And then at the end, it's just a name, and the name will evoke the face. And when I see the face, I will recognize it. So we can have this, but it's a very schematic kind of thing, and I'm not sure that it's absolutely essential. But our perceptions are acculturated. We don't see, we said it before, we experience a whole lot more than we understand, which is the same thing, which is you don't see everything that you see. So that culturally you've already edited. I was talking about editing too. You've already edited a whole lot of stuff out of what you're seeing. So perception, yes, gives us confidence that we're experiencing something real. A little more than a photograph gives us confidence that whatever was photographed is actually there somewhere. Okay. Past that, then you are into representations and you are into conceptual games, which are fine. I mean, all of them are necessary. That's why we have the three kinds of mental objects. And we probably have tons of other kinds that were not studied by Changeux and his team.
Really well put. It helped me organize that thinking well. And I like the comedian Lily Tomlin said, reality is just a collective hunch.
You know, I have a very soft spot for Lily Tomlin. She was what a wonderful actress, and that's another gift to the world. Yes, it is. It is. Reality is a collective hunch, and again, the more you get into quantum physics, the more that is the case. You see.
Anyways, that was really Jane Wagner, her partner, wrote that line and she said it. So to give credit properly due. Now, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're taught to overcome a weakness. Can you tell me a weakness you've turned into a strength?
I call it reversal. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
I do it all the time. I mean, when my wife died, it was a big shock and I reversed it. I reversed it into a strength. That was the biggest thing. I turned it into her. I knew her presence. I traveled all the time. So did she. So we got together on weekends and so on. And it was really a sense of presence that I had when she wasn't there. That didn't mean that we were, all that we had a typical marriage with a lot of complications, but not any unsurmountable one.
Yeah.
And so I turned her absence into presence. And that gave me a lot of strength till today.
Yeah.
So that was a very big deal. Also, this is the truth. I had quinsy. You know what quinsy is?
No, tell me.
It's something that goes in your throat. It's an inflammation of the throat that's very painful, and that you have to be hospitalized and you have to take intravenous and the whole thing. And I remember my mother-in-law came when I was in the hospital, and she said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Well, it's okay now. You must be so miserable." I said, "No, it's very interesting." And it's really true. Very often when I have a problem, I say, "This is very interesting."
Right.
So, I turn every weakness into strength when I can. Sometimes I can't. I mean, I can't turn my poor writing skills into a strength, but I try.
Beautiful, Derrick. You do it. You turn them into a strength. Because I've consulted your books, and I appreciate it. I wanted to say one thing quick. I'm not sure if people realize this. but the medium is the message, as we know about. It's the medium is the mess age, or the medium is the mass age, and it's ways to interpret it. But I come up with one that I've never heard other people say. The medium is the me sage. So meaning sage is the herb for the throat. And sage is also a wise person. So the medium is me, the person is the sage, and we're using the spoken word. So I don't know if you've ever heard that one, but with your dealings with your throat, that was beautiful. So one creates what one resists, or the comedian Bobcat Goldthwait morphed it into you are what you hate. And Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. But of course, Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So what do you think of this line? One creates what one resists. You create what you resist. What do you think of that line?
Oh, I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
Every psychiatrist is a madman. We know that. So why do I worry about writing? Well, because when I was a kid, talk about remembrance, I was sitting at the very desk where I am now. You can see it right here, that desk, because that's a family thing that I brought to Rome. I was sitting at that desk, and I had my father over my shoulder and saying, "Are you reading?" And I said, well. And so I realized that reading was, I was resisting reading.
Right.
And so I am still writing about writing.
Right.
So there's no doubt. We're like pearls. All of us who are trying, we're like pearls. Something is itching right there, and it turns into a pearl. It really does.
Yeah.
When it does, I mean, not every time.
Yeah.
Something's itching, always.
Yeah. Well, this fun. I got a few more, and then we'll bring Clinton on. These are 5 Alan Watts questions. Just briefly, in a few words, if you could answer them. Who started it all?
That's an old question, too. What I know from what I've read recently is that, and there's a lot of theories around it, but that there is no such thing as emptiness. There is no void. There is fluctuations of quanta. They are waves. They are in the most unexcited state, which means that they are the lowest energy state, but they're always there. And the moment they're excited, they become something. And then one theory, but not everybody agrees with it, says that when a wave encounters another wave, it's disturbed. And that disturbance created a collapse of one or both waves that creates the particle, and the particle becomes matter. But some people say that that's even too Newtonian to really say you understand quantum physics. So coming back to your question, yes, there was the Big Bang, but Penrose says that the Big Bang happens every now and then. That is, we go to the total extinction by, that we are, all things are separating at very, very high speed. I think they're traveling at 17,000 kilometers a second or something like that. So, the fact that we are held together by gravity and all that is one thing, but eventually everything that is will turn into a huge black hole. That's Penrose's idea. And so that the black hole then becomes tired of being a black hole, and then something comes out of that. So it starts all over again. It's very, very Indian. I was brought up in India, so I can tell you.
That was well put. Captain Beefheart and Frank Zappa were both at the ends of their life, and they watched a PBS TV special about the black hole, or the Big Bang Theory. And Frank asked Beefheart, what was before the Big Bang Theory? And he goes, the big.
It's a big nobody.
Okay, these are all quickie answers. You got to do it in 3 to 5 words. The second Alan Watts. Are we going to make it?
Yes.
Where do we put it?
In our pocket.
Good. Who's cleaning it up?
Not me.
Is it serious?
Well, sometimes, not all the time.
Good. Okay, I got 2 more, and then we're going to bring Clinton in. This has been amazing. This is a question that Marshall asked. I constantly ask people it, and it's really deep, and I know we could go on forever, but just briefly. How about technologies as the collective unconscious and art as the collective unconsciousness? So then I go, well, he's trying to differentiate between technology and art. And he's trying to say conscious is something and consciousness is something. How would you answer that? How about technologies as the collective unconscious and art as the collective unconsciousness?
Well, I have a problem with that because right now I'm working in what's called panpsychism, and it's a theory that I'm interested in. I don't necessarily buy it, but I want to explore it further, because what it says is that we don't produce consciousness, we act as filters for it. And every form, every animal, and by the way, I want to insist on that. I'm very, again, a Jain thought, I'm very close to animals here. Every animal has its own filtering device, and a filtering device is not just the brain, it's the whole body, it's the whole being. So I am very interested in consciousness seen as that, as something of which we have a part, each one of us. And so that that art, limiting it to artists would be somehow incomplete for me. As for technology being the unconscious substrate of evolution and change, medium being the message, yes, that's an interesting thought too. I mean, if you had to find a substrate, right?
Yeah. Good. Let's move on, because we want to give Clinton some time too, because he's so generous in helping us. So I'm going to ask one more, and then we'll bring Clinton on, and then I'll ask you 2 more. Derrick, this has been totally immensely amazing and joyful. Well, Joseph Boyce says, thank you. Joseph Boyce says, make the secrets productive. Lou Welsh, beat poet, guard the secrets, constantly reveal them. But it was Thornton Wilder in 28 said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it is the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for 80 minutes. You've been very articulate. And I'm not implying you haven't done this, but what's it really all about for you?
Well, it's an encounter, number one. The thing we've just shared is a very exciting and an interesting thing for me to live through. What is it? What is it all about? What is it? Is it just meditating together on what it is? I mean, that's what it is. So, we can't put our finger right on it, but yeah, we have been sharing something about what it is. And you know, I'm not even inventing anything here. Where was this great British writer? Irish writer, come on. He was always paired with Eugene Ionesco. You know who I'm talking about. Oh, come on.
Beckett?
Beckett.
Not Beckett.
Samuel Beckett. Samuel Beckett is...
Yeah.
Didn't he write a book about what it is?
Oh,
And
yeah, he wrote a book.
And it was about a poor devil, you and me, really, in the mud, in the dark, looking desperately for an opening to open. He's hungry and he has to open a can, and he can't find the opener. And this is a lie. And it's 200 pages, and that's all it is. So yeah, we've been in the mud looking for a can opener.
Yeah, we're knee deep in the swamp muck. You know, mud is the fifth element. Yeah,
Totally.
no, that's the best. Yeah, so Clinton, come on, because I'll just tell you, Beckett has one of the greatest plays ever. It's like 30 seconds and a baby sitting on top of a pile of garbage, and it just goes, wah, and that's the end. And it's like all the people go, well, that was an interesting play. I'm glad it's done early. We can go out for dinner now.
Exactly. That's the tragedy.
Hey,
anyway,
Lynn,
so I forgot about this.
I know. I'm sorry I hogged it so much because we got to fly in 15 minutes. But Clinton, go. You're up. Up your sound. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
So it is actually the last track on the Genesis album, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. It is here. It is now. It is the jigsaw. It is purple haze. It never stays in one place. It's not a passing phase. It's in the singles bar in the distance of a face. It is in between the cages. It's always in a space. It is here. It is now. It's a great album, cover to cover. So I thought I'd share that first and foremost.
That's real culture.
Genesis, of course. It has to be Peter Gabriel, though. All right.
They also wrote a song with McLuhan's name in it.
Same album.
Yeah. Yep.
So listen, you've given me so much to work with. You've given me enough rope to weave you a hammock to hang in there, Derrick. I don't know where to start. So just a question. Have you been reading Ernst von Glasersfeld?
Sorry, who?
Ernst von Glasersfeld. He's the social constructivist who tied together Piaget in the tradition of Vico. So all of his stuff is about how Vico and Piaget were developing the same idea.
Huh. So it's Ernst, I'm okay. Von, I'm okay. Glaserfeld.
Glaserfeld.
Okay.
Feld.
Okay, I've got it. I'm going to check it.
He's a radical social constructivist, more so than, say, Kenneth Gergen. Yeah, I've been digging into him because I've been digging into Seymour Papert, who was a very important professor at MIT working with Sherry Turkle on children and computers. And I mean, just because you were probably around and paying attention at the time, I'm legitimately curious as to your take. What happened to Logo, and why aren't children learning to why does not everyone in society learn computer programming instead of math on a chalkboard? Because it seems to be an important part of understanding the medium is kids learning how computer programming works en masse, right?
Totally. And it should be part of the education of the past as well as the future and the present, but it's not. You're right. I think it's the same thing regarding learning the music. You have people who play and they don't want to ever read a note, and you have people who start with the note and then start composing. So it's the same thing. I think people are afraid. I mean, computers are still very unwieldy things. They are, not everybody wants to put their car apart in order to know how the motor works.
Well, that's why school forces you to learn stuff, though. No one wants to learn algebra ever. Why doesn't school teach computer programming? Not because the kids want to, because they have to, right?
Yeah, but that's a very old problem, the problem of education, because we are still, the world is still teaching in ways that have nothing to do with the contemporary situation. It's very difficult there are some schools, and they were particularly very, important attempt at really relating to, the student-centered education, the SEED program, Summerhill, what was the name of the Steiner School, Montessori. There was a whole lot of experiences of trying to teach students in a way that was really relevant to their own time. I have invented the theme of the Jesuit 2.0 because Jesuits were the first picking up from the paideia of the Greeks during the Renaissance. Ignaz of Loyola created the first systematic formal educational program. And it is still used, and it was meant for the children of important families so as to teach them to take over and deal with the affairs of the state or of their parents. And the basis of it was reading and writing. That was the ground of everything. But it was not the only thing. There was also physical education, and there was also how to present oneself, and even theater, which was banned by the church, by the way, which is kind of interesting. So what we need is Jesuit 2.0s, Jesuits who could adapt their very strong and very solid backbone kind of teaching to the new possibilities and the new tool. And the new tool is the computer. And you're absolutely right. People should learn how to program. Just as, and they might actually, and they would create applications the way, an inspired student makes poetry.
Yeah, I think so. We always use the latest technology as metaphors, mostly for ourselves and for our minds. So the drives of the steam engine, or a line of thoughts staying on track. These phrases came about with the locomotive and whatnot. But how can we use computers as a metaphor when no one even understands computers?
Well, Gerry Fialka did very early on. She called computer the second self, and she was actually showing how kids related to their computers in the way that they actually thought they were making friends with it. So there is that has been expressed. But the thing about it is that not everybody is as brilliant as Gerry Fialka, especially not educators. But I don't know. That's one of the the good thing is that you can get a lot of education right now online if you really want it. But so far, most of the classroom, particularly in Europe, it's better, I think, in Canada. And I don't know about the States, but in Canada, it's certainly better generally. But most of education of kids in Europe is babysitting.
Good. That's great. And I'm glad you mentioned Turkle again, because her books form the backbone of my last paper and will be integral to my next one as well for the New Explorationist Journal. Thank you again. This has been wonderful.
Wonderful for me, really.
Super cool. Thank you so much, Derrick. And we'll close out with these two questions. We hope we can continue this dialogue forever. What's the healthiest or what's the most impactful shift you see developing today?
I've said that already, but I'll repeat it. I think that quantum physics is telling us about something else, about nature, about reality, about our relationships with reality, that is completely groundbreaking and completely capable, not only because it is supported by more and more technologies which prove that it's real. Even GPS is improved by quantum physics. We now know that birds and butterflies find their way over 3,000 kilometers thanks to quantum physics. We know that the chlorophyll function is created in plants by quantum physics. So we know that quantum physics is everywhere, but we also know that it doesn't really agree with how Western people have sanctified, not sanctified, but scientified nature. So we have positioned ourselves as master of nature, as exploiters of the environment, not as partners. And so whether you are Greta Thunberg or whether you are, a climate denier, you're in a situation where you're still, this is the enemy situation we were talking about. They both keep their position. Instead, what Greta should say, yes, we should stop polluting the world and all that. We should actually love it. We should get into it. And that's what quantum physics is telling us. And I know that it'll come through. That's certainly what I'm trying to do with my book.
Well, when Marshall said the new nature, was he saying electricity is the new nature, that we don't understand that what becomes the dominant is what the word nature means. That's what it throws me off a little, because I think the cartoon I saw with the child coming out of the mother's womb and it was on a cell phone was the new nature.
I know. No, I've had a lot of thought about this question of electricity being the ground. I am extremely interested now. I think my next book is going to be dealing with that, saying what are the grounds from which figures emerge, right? The basic idea is that literacy was the ground for an extraordinary quantity of figures. What you need to know is what are the principles that constitute and relate those figures among themselves, so that you have fields. So it's I feel sometimes like the chance gardener in being there.
Yeah.
I'm using the really rock bottom metaphor, that there is ground and then you have flowers that come out of the ground and they make a field, and then the field. But the point is really much more to actually see what are the principles of the construction of those figures. This is why I'm talking about the analytical principle that came in learning to read and write. What are the principles behind the digital transformation? And what are the principles behind quantum physics, and what kind of figures will they actually create? So that's the question. I don't have the answer for all of that, but I have at least this model, which is my method for the moment. I may have to give it up because it may not be strong enough, but I'm working on that.
What gives you the most optimism?
Wow. Depends on what. This is so, I don't want it to sound egoistical or bragging or anything, but I'm living a really wonderful life. And that is itself the proof of my pudding. So I know it's not an answer, but it is that I am naturally trusting. And I feel that eventually we have, I'll tell you why. It was horrible to go through the Renaissance. 200 years of people killing each other. And that happened. It's been horrible to suffer to terrorism, which has been going on. Change is horrible. People don't get it for a very long time. What gives me optimism is that we actually did go through the Renaissance, and we are going through this period. That's what gives me optimism. It's the horrors of the past that tells you that even if it happens, you can still go through it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Derrick. It's a full circle thing. It's the snake eating itself. The first question from the first question's from Wilhelm Reich. What's the best thing for a human being? Another human being, to live, like you said, to live. And then the last question's from the last question they asked Groucho Marx. What gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people. And he spent his life cutting down and making fun of other people. Yeah. But, I think all three of us appreciate Marshall's humor and, constantly inspiring us to invent new questions and new metaphors. Yep. And his statement I love to end with, and it has been joyous, is communication of the new is a miracle, but it's not impossible. So thanks for all this newness, Derrick. It's really been wonderful.
It's been wonderful for me too. Thank you very much, and have a